That sounds amazing. Can I ask, would there be after hours the Stranger episode of the Earth arc? Do you know what this book is, you two?
Yes, the Doctor Who erotica that Lance Parkin wrote.
Luke looks shocked. Luke, I'm assuming you're not aware of this.
Yeah, I think there was. I think Virgin Books. Virgin Books, as well as having the New Adventures, they also had this line of erotica. So kind of like Mills and Boone, but like sexier. And
some of the sexier.
So twice the Fabio.
Some of the Doctor Who writers, because it was all the same office, they ended up writing for that line as well, usually under pen name.
I think we have to sort of park the sex because
before we park the sex, then can I just say that the scene.
I want to talk about the sex a lot, but maybe later. Because I've got lots of sex. I mean, the Bad Sex Awards. If this had been on the radar, this has got so many. I've got so many quotes written out.
Okay, but for a fair comparison, you need to go back to John Peel's Genesis, which has got nipple tweaking and so on.
Yeah. Well, I remember that was in the tabloids, wasn't it? Because he had a topless prostitute.
But as to the actual act of two people having sex in the Doctor's house, it's a mere paragraph. It's not explicit. And I have to say, I quite welcomed a moment of tenderness between two characters in a world that seemed to be so desperately crying out for it. I'm far less bothered. I mean, I'm with you. I don't want hanky-panky in my TARDIS. But I'm far less bothered by two people having a loving, consensual moment together than I am by the 10th Doctor bragging about bedding Queen Elizabeth I, which is where I think the New Who got it so badly wrong.
Or Matt Smith emerging from that woman's skirt saying, I've had a jolly time under there, Before we start talking about the giggle, I've got a question for you, because I've asked you about your favourite Doctor Who author. I have asked you about your favourite Doctor Who book. Now we're going in the other direction, and it's not very nice to name and shame, but let's be balanced. What's the Doctor Who book that you picked up and started reading and wished you didn't?
Well, I was listening to a previous episode of this podcast in which one of your guests asked this question, said Resurrection of the Daleks by Eric Saywood. And I'm not one to join a pile-on, so I'm going to say Revelation of the Daleks by Eric Saywood, which contains the line, "This is where I was forced to kill Dad. It's so sad. He was a super father and one of the greatest agronomists in the galaxy."
Why can't people write for the Seventh Doctor and Ace?
I mean, I think some people can.
I think some people can, but I think a lot of people can. And maybe this goes back to the problem with the New Adventures again. I feel like Andrew Cartmel employed some really brilliant writers and also workshopped a lot of ideas. And when you've got dialogue by Ben Aronovich, it trips off the tongue. It sounds effortless. And I feel like a lot of people go through their Seventh Doctor stories basically trying to make it sound like a script by Ben Aronovich. And so it feels immediately forced. So it feels like fan fiction. It feels like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the kind of scenes that McCoy and Aldred did in the Wilderness Years for various kind of unofficial spin-offs, where all the dialogue was just this absolutely nauseating, where we're going to kind of pinch half a sentence from Remembrance of the Daleks and half from Curse of Fenric and make it sound like the Seventh Doctor's talking, and they sort of gamely commit to it. It's a mean thing to say, and I know that you're usually very, very generous towards Sophie Aldred on your podcast.
Absolutely.
When you can hear McCoy and Aldred saying the dialogue, it's quite often not a good thing.
And it's a wonderful melange of all of these things, of this idea that, as you said, relating it back to what the kids know. What can we know more than home? Your home here now is the setting for this entire adventure. Literally, we've come out the other side of the TV screen. We're having an adventure in your house, kids. The fridge is alive. The tanning bed is alive. There's even the butler robot is called Steerpike, which makes me think of Mervyn Peake or Steerpeak.
He's described like Eddie Butler as being a bit sniffy, isn't he?
Yeah.
He looks down on the tanning robot, oh, you.
But But even then, it's all a bit, as a name, it's all a bit Gormenghast, and you've got all of that as well. Because we also discovered this house, as the original title implies, is a bungalow. It's just one floor above ground. But then there's about 41 floors below the ground. There's a brilliant description of it as being like a rotting tooth set into the planet.
Quote here, you ready?
Yes.
The strange, sophisticated house being like a giant tooth with its root reaching deep underground where the rot sets in.
And that's evocative as well, because there's only 3 people who live in this house. And again, Sunset Boulevard, Beauty and the Beast, Wuthering Heights, a Citizen Kane, a classic image that we have and we understand, which is of people in a home that is too big for them, and how alienating that is, and how alone that is, and how strange that is. We have this space that is built for people, and no one is in it, and why, and what can be happening there. It makes the homely seem lonely.
You've had the radical transgressive material, something like Transit, and it hasn't landed, and it's got column inches in the Sunday press of Heavens to Betsy, the sky is falling. Pearl Collection, a Doctor Who book has this type of thing. You've got that out of the system.
The EDAs did make the newspapers when Compassion turned into a TARDIS. There were some articles about something like the Doctor riding around inside a woman.
But that's a different thing, though, isn't it? That's a fear around sex in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Whereas Transit was far more about language, and it's far more visceral and far more in your face. Here is a prostitute. That was the Texan moves into the position which the television couldn't go to. Ace, as a teenager, surely her background must have had sex, and yet we have the whole weird conversation with the soldier in Curse of Fenric, and the fact that she's probably from 1984, as I think Miles and Woods argue, based on her weird kind of non-swearing slang. And so there's this weird kind of rejection of sex. But the Virgin Adventures, they're not afraid of sex whatsoever, but that's the type of readership. Even there in the first book, Genesis, the Doctor happily sends a prostitute back into her line of work in order to get information. It's that Seventh Doctor figure, that kind of manipulative figure, the mythical Cartmel plan that we see writ large. Whereas this is different, and they're producing something maybe more interesting, or as interesting, I think is what I mean. But they're ignored because Big Finish, that's proper Doctor Who, and it's got actors, and it's got scripts, and it's a kind of prejudice about original Doctor Who in fiction, because up until that point, Doctor Who this is how you learn about episodes you can't see anymore. It's Terrence Dicks and maybe Malcolm Hulke, all Ian Masters' Bastard and his, all shocking. But it's laying the path, and so Aronovich and Platt and Briggs are all laying a path, but who's reading it at that point? But they're pointing us in the direction of New Who, but these novels. But there's a weird thing going on with DWM that it is tying itself in to Big Finish. And Big Finish maybe isn't as interesting at this point as what the Eighth Doctor Adventures are doing, because there's some fascinating material there, some really great material there. And James is right, there's some type of revisit to it or re-examination of it is due, and that's what this podcast could do.
Luke, come on then, Dazzlers.
My first choice. Come on, number 2. What are you guys talking about? It's Fitz. Fitz is my number 1. I think for me is I like Space Bros, like Jamie and the Doctor, to an extent. Stephen and the Doctor. Like, I don't get that much in Doctor Who in any of its various mediums that often at all. It's like the Doctor just wants to travel with ladies. I'm like, well, okay, I can see why you might want to do that, but I like Space Bros. I like that Jamie is the Doctor's best loyal friend and stuff, and I like that aspect of Fitz as well. Yeah, the hero worships the Doctor and all that kind of stuff, but he's got his back, his best friend. When the Doctor loses his memories and doesn't know who he is, Fitz is like there for him, all this kind of stuff. He's a doggy companion, isn't he? Like, and that I like those aspects about him, I guess, more than the guy who gets laid all the time, even though that's nice too, I guess. But for me, it was more just that friendship between him and the Eighth Doctor that I kind of don't get that often in Doctor Who. Between like just two dudes being friends and stuff and traveling together.
Where you can go into these virtual reality sort of mindscapes and witness the Dalek atrocities and visit all of these famous events from history, but not quite right. So instead, we get the Dalek invasion of Earth 1966 AD, or there's a bit where we visit the jungles of Spyrodon, but it's the gardens of Spyrodon. You get the marsh Daleks from the old Dalek books in there, or my personal favourite. And you said there are some panels here that you would like to have as a poster on your wall. I would like to have page 2 of part 5, Daleks versus Dragons.
I wondered if he was doing a pun of Dungeons and Dragons there. Daleks and Dragons.
Yeah, quite possibly.
My god, it's an enormous dragon, right? And he's setting fire to an Imperial Dalek with a huge gout of flame that's coming out of his mouth.
Yes, the Imperial Daleks are trying to invade Albion with all these Arthurian knights. I think someone says of them, oh, here we go, so close you can feel the fire.
Oh, please.
Time. It's far worse because basically he's given the task of exploring the 26 years and the TV movie of Doctor Who, and basically comes to the conclusion that the only Doctor Who that was good was The Talons of Weng Chiang and every story that Andrew Cartmel worked on.
I remember being so angry with this book.
It was a library book, and I threw it across the room because I just said, just shut up. I don't care.
He didn't mind the Sea Devils too much, I seem to recall.
He didn't, no.
No, but pretty much all of the 80s until he came along.
Yeah, and it was just soul-destroying reading. I just thought, well, what is the bloody point of this?
But I do think as well, if you're going to take a critical eye to other people's work, take that same critical eye to your own.
Absolutely. And yes, as I've said many times, he's a great script editor, but he's not a good editor of scripts.
Right, so I've got a feeling that my experience of reading this time round was a lot more pleasurable than yours. Am I wrong?
No, you're wrong.
Oh.
Next time on Ham's Book Club, we'll be talking about...
Jesus, I just spat my coffee out. Can you warn me when you're going to be witty? Okay?
I'll hold up a sign a few minutes before.
The other thing I think that was interesting about Mike's racism in the book version is how it relates to the other characters who are present. So, for example, this isn't mentioned at all on screen or even hinted at, but Rachel is Jewish in the novelization.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. And she is working with, and apparently good friends with, basically a Nazi. But it's also clear that you've got someone who is a racist serving in the British Army, which is, this is not what we want to think about. We want to think about the British Army as being against all that.
She knows though, Jason. She knows, because there's a very quick exchange between Rachel and Mike where she explicitly says something about Ace being British.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and they say, I wouldn't want her to be foreign, and they laugh it off rather than anything else. And of course, it's not clear on the screen, but if you think about it, every one of them must have seen that sign in Mrs. Smith's window, and yet they're still happy to sit in her living room and, eat their breakfast with her.
Well, come on.
Just let's talk about. But
let's go to my favourite list then.
Oh, all right.
Select one. To Berry.
Can I just say? I'll select a slightly boring one first. Ease my way into it because you want to warm yourself up for the maybe slightly more controversial choices. So I'll go with Parasite first.
Oh boy, okay.
Oh,
you don't like torture porn then?
No, not in the slightest, and particularly not when there's several fucking books of it in a row. You got to the end of that year, 94. It was it's great. So I could do with something that's just ease my mind. It's like, holy Christ! And so again, it's at this point you go, Jim Mortimer really needs a good editor to get the best out of him.
And genuinely. And I think that's a good question to ask, because I think you can absolutely portray a public persona of being on top of everything and really happy. And I, like everybody else, goes through ups and downs. And there have been some downs lately. But it's conversations like this, frankly, that make it all worthwhile. So thank you for asking.
Well, that's very kind of you. I only ask because I've had a fairly up and down time of it, and I know a couple of other people that we know have also been sort of bringing these things up. So I thought, let's just kind of kick off the show with it.
Ian, is it because we read all these Doctor Who books? Is that why we're having so many downs?
Well, it might be that there might be a link between reading some of these books and massive psychological dysfunction.
And I thought there was some really fun stuff with the New Adventures regulars as well. I don't get to have a lot of fun in these books, so it's quite refreshing, really. Okay, well, do you know what? You made a good point there. So let's start negative. What would have to be removed if this was published today, Andrew?
Well, the main thing is the attempted rape of Ace, which is just like, why is that there? Like, I feel like with this book, Terrance Dicks is kind of like, okay, I'm writing a new adventure. I'm going to do what I want to do, but I'm also going to put in the stuff that they want for the new adventures. And apparently, one of those things is sexual assault. And it's just
not the last time as well. He does it in Catastrophia. And he has a whole gang of rapists going around in Warmonger.
Don't read Warmonger. Just don't do it.
That was one of my recommends in one episode, Look, sorry.
And I think it's a fairly straightforward story as well, because some of those new adventures are. I mean, I did start Sky Pirates years ago. I did dig it out last night because I finished Original Sin last night. I thought, I'm just gonna there's a part of me tempted just to keep reading. And then I think I just had this quick skim through Sky Pirates and I'm not sure. I couldn't finish it last time. I'm not sure I can actually get around to starting it this time. So it's interesting that you have this kind of clean slate, blank start, fresh start, and then you follow up with something really, really weird.
Impenetrable.
And I think that's what sometimes the new adventures would do. They would oscillate between these quite straightforward books with slightly darker, more grown-up themes, and then there'd be something where it's like, what the hell am I reading?
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. I'm well up for that.
Do you know what? It was only after I sent you the question that I started pondering it myself and thinking, what the hell would I recommend to an intelligent 12-year-old? Because my first thought was Exodus, Time Worm Exodus, to try and get them into the original novels, because that's a really great punchy read. Seventh Doctor and Ace, written by Terrance Dicks. Adolf.
Punchy, I'm afraid I think it rambles a bit.
You're not a 12-year-old, all right? The 12-year-old in mind thinks it's wonderful. Okay, whoa, go with it. But then I thought,
12-year-olds today think J.K. Rowling's a good writer, so they'll be just blown away.
Actually, that's
rambling J.K.
Fact fans, placebo effect later establishes that that's where the Radio Times comic strips happened.
Oh, really? Okay.
And in fact, I do remember now, back in sort of circa 2001, 2002, back in the days of the Doctor Who reference guide online, if anyone remembers that, there was a general fan effort to fit, back in the days when we still tried to make sense of the Eighth Doctor's timeline, to try and fit all of the non-BBC books, Eighth Doctor Adventures, into that year. It had a whole section. Yeah, so that was where all
They've never had a good night's sleep, have they?
That's where
but it doesn't feel all over the place.
No, it feels even though we've had two artists so far, it feels all of the same series, as it were. And if it was a series, you'd think
ripped.
This is really on for the strongest run of Doctor Who ever.
Some of the sad things about the graphic novels is I really wish this was on the screen. This was the Doctor Who I wanted in the 90s.
Could they have done this on the screen? How would this have looked on the screen?
Imagine them trying to realise the flood. Come on.
Yeah. I think they just make it such a virtue of the visual medium, and I get that television is a visual medium, but not in quite the same way. And this has got a limitless budget, really. It's limited only by the imagination of the artists and the writers, and it just seems to me that they've got that imagination to paint these vast worlds, but they've also got the discipline to do it in a way that is, which you have to, if you're going to tell it in so few frames, in 7 pages an episode, you have to be disciplined about it. You have to be really thematically focused, and all of these stories do that.
some reason.
The Doctor almost never gets hunted in a book about hunting the Doctor.
Yeah, it's so odd. There's so many ideas in this book, and it's kind of like it's a little bit like he gets bored of each idea before fully
like Sebastian himself.
Like Sebastian, yeah, exactly.
Don't tell me it was a very meta.
I don't think it was.
It was just badly written.
But yeah, I feel like there's probably about 5 or 6 ideas in this book that could have made a great new series adventure book for kids.
For reasons.
Can I tell you something about Rishi Sunak? Once upon a time, he was one of my weird crushes. You know how you have weird crushes, people that are really ugly, but for some reason you fancy. But then, unfortunately, he got the position of Prime Minister, and now I hate his guts. So there we are.
Yeah, there we go. That is a genuinely weird crush.
My other two are Robert Wedd and Richard Ayoade.
They're less weird.
No, they're very smart. I do like a smart bloke, That's the trouble. Yeah. I don't think Rishi Sunak's that smart, if I'm honest.
There we go. Bit of satire. Good. Keep it going.
Actually, do you know what? News report. Dun, 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 dun. And this is Joe Ford reporting from the Hamster Book Club. Lord Greyhaven has taken charge as a enormous spaceship is hovering above Great Britain. The entire political system in ruins, and the provisional government has been put together. How am I doing so far?
I thought you were robbed when they gave that bit in Aliens of London to Andrew Marr, honestly.
Oh, he was terrible, wasn't he? What connects all of these people? We cannot tell. How are we going to end this thing then? I'm never quite sure how to do that.
I like how we just like bye.
Well, bye now then.
Hang on.
Reading.
It should be something grandiose with Managra. Should some Shakespearean farewell.
Yes, come on.
Adieu.
Oh, adieu.
Adieu to you and to you.
I'll just cut it there.